The winter rain drummed steadily against the windows of ITV's South Bank studios as dawn broke over London. Inside, the familiar hum of television production filled the corridors, cables being checked, lights being adjusted, coffee being consumed in industrial quantities. But beneath the routine, there was an electric undercurrent that everyone on the Lorraine show could feel. Today was different. Today, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, would be sitting across from Lorraine Kelly for what promised to be a landmark interview. The familiar theme music swelled as Lorraine's face filled millions of screens across Britain. Her smile was warm, her eyes bright with the genuine enthusiasm that had made her a national treasure. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the show. We have an absolutely wonderful program lined up for you today. But first, I am thrilled, truly thrilled, to welcome a very special guest. He's here to talk about his groundbreaking work in mental health advocacy and his new foundation initiatives. Please give a warm welcome to Prince Harry. The studio audience erupted in applause as Harry emerged from the wings, his practiced smile firmly in place. He crossed the floor with the confident stride that had been drilled into him since childhood and settled into the plush chair opposite Lorraine. The cameras found their marks, the lights blazed, and for a moment, everything seemed perfectly normal. "Harry, thank you so much for joining us this morning," Lorraine began, her Scottish lilt adding warmth to every syllable. "I know you've been incredibly busy with your various projects. How are you finding being back in London?" "It's always interesting to be back," Harry replied carefully, his hands clasped in his lap. "There's something about the British weather that reminds you where you come from, isn't there?" Light laughter rippled through the audience, and Lorraine smiled appreciatively. "Now, you're here to talk about your mental health foundation, which I think is absolutely wonderful work. Can you tell our viewers what inspired this particular initiative?" Harry launched into his prepared remarks, hitting every talking point with practiced precision. He spoke about the importance of breaking down stigma, about reaching young people before they reached crisis point, about his own struggles and how speaking openly had helped him heal. Lorraine nodded along, her expression one of genuine interest and sympathy. "And I think what's particularly powerful about your message," Lorraine observed, "is that you've been willing to share your own vulnerabilities. That takes real courage." "Thank you. I believe that if I can use my platform to help even one person feel less alone, then all the criticism is worth it." It was a subtle shift, the word criticism hanging in the air just a fraction longer than necessary. Lorraine's experienced ear caught it immediately. She had intended to keep the interview focused on Harry's charitable work, but her journalistic instincts recognized an opening. "You mentioned criticism," she said, her tone remaining warm, but becoming slightly more focused. "You've certainly faced your fair share of that, particularly from the British media. How do you cope with that constant scrutiny while trying to advocate for mental health?" Harry's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, I think it's important to recognize that much of what passes for journalism in this country is actually harassment dressed up in respectable clothing. The tabloid culture here is toxic, and it affects everyone it touches." The statement was more pointed than anything his handlers had approved, and Lorraine sensed the energy in the studio shift. The audience seemed to lean forward collectively, sensing that they might be witnessing something more than a standard promotional interview. "That's quite a strong statement," Lorraine responded, her smile still in place but her eyes now carrying a sharper glint. "Do you think perhaps there's a difference between legitimate journalistic inquiry and the kind of harassment you're describing?" "I think the line has been blurred beyond recognition," Harry replied, his voice taking on an edge that hadn't been there moments before. "When reporters camp outside your home, when photographers chase your car, when your private conversations are hacked and published for entertainment, that's not journalism. That's persecution." "Of course, no one would defend those practices," Lorraine agreed. "But surely you can see how some might find it difficult to reconcile your calls for privacy with your decision to share intimate details of your life through various media deals. The Netflix documentary, the memoir, these were your choices to make your private life public." The question was delivered with professional neutrality, but its impact was immediate and visible. Harry's posture stiffened, and a flush began to creep up his neck. "That's a complete mischaracterization of what we've done," he said, his voice cooling noticeably. "There's a fundamental difference between choosing to tell your own story and having it stolen and distorted by people who don't care about truth or consequences." Is there, though? Lorraine pressed gently. You've received substantial sums to share personal information about your family, your childhood, your relationships. Some would say you're doing exactly what you've accused the tabloids of, profiting from private matters. Some would say, Harry repeated, and there was now unmistakable irritation in his tone. And who are these some, Lorraine? The same media outlets that have spent decades trying to destroy my family. The same journalists who hounded my mother to her death? The mention of Princess Diana sent a visible ripple through the studio. Lorraine's expression flickered with something, perhaps sympathy, perhaps recognition that they had crossed into dangerous territory. No one would ever minimize what happened to your mother, Lorraine said carefully. It was a tragedy that affected the entire nation. But with respect, Harry, bringing up Diana whenever you're asked difficult questions, doesn't that rather shut down any possibility of legitimate discussion about your choices? The accusation, delivered with Lorraine's characteristic gentleness, seemed to strike Harry like a physical blow. His eyes widened, and for a moment, the careful media training that had guided him through hundreds of interviews appeared to desert him entirely. I beg your pardon? His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried through the silent studio with perfect clarity. I'm simply observing, Lorraine continued, her courage mounting as she committed to her line of questioning, that you seem to invoke your mother's memory quite frequently when faced with criticism. And while everyone understands and respects the profound impact of that loss, at some point, we have to be able to discuss your actions as an adult without that conversation being immediately ended by references to tragedy. You have no idea what you're talking about, Harry said, and now his voice was rising. You sit there in your comfortable chair, with your comfortable career, asking your comfortable questions, and you presume to tell me how I should process the death of my mother. I'm not telling you anything about how to process your grief, Lorraine replied, and her own Scottish accent was becoming more pronounced, always a sign that her emotions were engaged. I'm asking whether it's appropriate to use that grief as a shield against all accountability. Accountability? Harry laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's rich coming from someone whose entire industry has systematically avoided accountability for decades. Where was the accountability when the press destroyed my mother's life? Where was the accountability when they drove my wife to the point of mental breakdown? Where is the accountability for the racism, the lies, the constant harassment? The audience sat in stunned silence, aware that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Lorraine, to her credit, did not flinch. I am not the industry, Harry. I am one woman who has spent her career trying to conduct interviews with dignity and respect. I have never hacked a phone, never chased anyone's car, never published stolen photographs. Yet you sit there and paint everyone with the same brush because it's easier than engaging with legitimate questions. Legitimate questions? Harry was leaning forward now, his body language becoming increasingly aggressive. Your legitimate question was essentially accusing me of exploiting my family for money. How is that different from what any tabloid would ask? Because I'm not asking it to hurt you, Lorraine shot back. I'm asking because millions of people are genuinely confused by the contradiction between your stated desire for privacy and your commercial decisions. These are people who supported you, who sympathized with you, and who now feel that perhaps they were sold a narrative that doesn't entirely match reality. I sold a narrative? Harry's voice had risen to a level that made several crew members exchange nervous glances. I'll tell you what narrative was sold. The narrative that I was somehow less worthy because of who my mother was. The narrative that my wife was somehow a threat because of the color of her skin. The narrative that we were greedy and selfish for, wanting to protect our children from the same fate that befell me. Harry, no one is questioning your desire to protect your family. Aren't they? Aren't you? Because from where I'm sitting, this entire interview has been an exercise in questioning every decision I've ever made, while giving absolutely no weight to the circumstances that led to those decisions. Lorraine took a deep breath, and viewers who had watched her for years recognized the slight straightening of her spine that preceded her most direct moments. All right then, let's talk about circumstances. Let's talk about the fact that you left a country that adores your grandmother, your father, your brother, and instead of quietly building a life abroad, you've spent the subsequent years giving interview after interview, criticizing the family that raised you. You've accused them of racism, of cruelty, of neglect. You've shared private conversations that were never meant to be public. You've written a book that many found breathtakingly disloyal. And through all of this, your family has maintained a dignified silence. So, Yes, Harry, I am asking questions about your choices because those choices have consequences, and someone ought to ask you to account for them. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Harry's face had gone pale, then flushed crimson. When he spoke, his voice was trembling with barely contained rage. Dignified silence? Is that what we're calling it now? My family didn't maintain a dignified silence. They briefed against us. They leaked stories. They allowed lies to stand uncorrected because it suited their purposes. And you sit here acting as if you're some neutral arbiter of truth when you're just another mouthpiece for the establishment. Now wait just a minute, Lorraine began, but Harry cut her off. No, I don't think I will wait. I came here in good faith to talk about mental health, to try to help people, and instead I've been subjected to a character assassination dressed up as journalism. This is exactly why I left this country. Because no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, people like you will always find a way to twist it into something negative. People like me? Lorraine's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. And what kind of person am I, Harry? Please, enlighten me. You're a collaborator, Harry spat. You pretend to be friendly, to be sympathetic, but ultimately you serve the same masters as the rest of them. The palace feeds you access, and in exchange, you protect their interests. It's a cozy arrangement, isn't it? The accusation was so direct, so personal, that Lorraine's professional composure finally cracked. Her eyes flashed with genuine anger as she rose slightly from her chair. How dare you? How dare you come onto my program and accuse me of corruption? I have spent 30 years building a reputation for fairness and integrity. I have never taken orders from any palace, any government, any institution. Everything I have achieved in this career has been through hard work and honesty, not through birth or privilege. There it is, Harry said, standing abruptly. His chair rolled backward with the sudden movement, startling several audience members in the front row. The real message? I don't deserve anything because I was born into it. Whatever I accomplish, whatever I try to do, it will always be dismissed because of my family. That's the British way, isn't it? Build people up so you can tear them down. Oh, sit down, Lorraine said, her Scottish accent now thick with emotion. Stop being so dramatic. You haven't been torn down. You've been asked reasonable questions that you don't like answering. There's a difference. Don't tell me to sit down. Harry's voice was loud enough now that the studio microphones were picking up every syllable with uncomfortable clarity. I am not one of your regular guests who will simply accept being spoken to like a naughty child. Then stop behaving like one, Lorraine fired back. You're a grown man, a father, someone who claims to advocate for mental health and emotional maturity. Yet the moment anyone questions your narrative, you throw a tantrum and play the victim. It's exhausting, Harry. It's exhausting for everyone who has to pretend that your endless grievances are somehow profound rather than simply self-indulgent. The word self-indulgent seemed to detonate something in Harry, his face contorted with a fury that shocked everyone watching. You know nothing about my life, nothing about what I've been through. You sit there in your little kingdom, queen of morning television, passing judgment on people whose struggles you couldn't begin to comprehend. My mother died when I was 12 years old. I had to walk behind her coffin in front of the entire world. I had to grow up in a fishbowl where every mistake, every normal teenage moment was headline news. And when I finally found happiness, found a woman who loves me, found the courage to step away from a system that was crushing me, I was branded a traitor. So don't you dare call me self-indulgent. For a moment, genuine sympathy flickered across Lorraine's face, but it was quickly replaced by something harder. And I'm sorry for all of that, Harry, truly. But at some point, you have to stop using your pain as permission to hurt others. Your father lost his mother last year. Your brother lost his mother at an even younger age than you. Your grandmother lost her son's love and respect in the most public way possible. They've all suffered too. Yet somehow they managed to carry on with dignity rather than selling their grievances to the highest bidder. Dignity? Harry laughed bitterly. That's what you call covering up scandals, protecting predators, refusing to acknowledge. That's enough. Lorraine's voice cut through his accusation like a blade. I will not have you make allegations like that on my program. If you have evidence of criminal conduct, take it to the police, but I will not be used as a platform for unsubstantiated attacks on the royal family. Unsubstantiated? The whole world knows. The whole world knows what you've chosen to tell them, Lorraine interrupted. One side of a very complicated story. And that's fine. You're entitled to your perspective. But you're not entitled to come onto my show and expect me to simply nod along with everything you say as if it were gospel truth. Harry ripped the microphone from his lapel with such force that the sound technicians winced at the feedback that screeched through the monitors. "This interview is over," he declared. "Yes, it is," Lorraine agreed, and her voice was ice cold. "Security, please escort Mr. Windsor from the premises." The use of Mr. Windsor, rather than his title, was a deliberate slight, and everyone in the studio recognized it as such. Harry's face contorted with disbelief. "You're actually throwing me out? You're actually going to physically remove me from your studio?" "I'm removing a guest who has become abusive and has refused to engage in civil conversation. Your title doesn't exempt you from basic standards of behavior. Not here, not on my show." "This is outrageous. This is persecution. When this gets out, people will see exactly what happened. They'll see a journalist asking reasonable questions and a prince who couldn't handle being treated like a normal human being for once in his life." Harry took a step toward Lorraine, and 2 security guards immediately moved to intercept him. The tension in the studio reached a breaking point as several audience members gasped audibly. "Don't you dare suggest I can't handle normal treatment," Harry said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that was somehow more unsettling than his shouts. "You have no idea what normal means. You've never lived my life." "No, I haven't," Lorraine replied, standing her ground even as the security guards positioned themselves between her and the furious prince. "But I've lived my own life, Harry, and I've managed to do so without constantly demanding that everyone feel sorry for me. Perhaps you should try it sometime." For a long moment, Harry simply stared at her, his chest heaving with emotion. Then, with a visible effort, he straightened his jacket and turned toward the exit. "You'll regret this," he said, the words thrown over his shoulder as he strode toward the studio doors. "This country will see you for what you really are." "They already know who I am," Lorraine called after him. "I've been in their living rooms for decades. The question is whether they're finally starting to see who you are." Harry paused at the doorway, and for a moment it seemed like he might turn around and continue the confrontation. But then, with one final shake of his head, he disappeared through the doors, followed closely by his handlers and the security team. The studio sat in absolute silence. Lorraine turned back to face her cameras. Her face was flushed, her hands were trembling slightly, but her voice was steady as she addressed her millions of viewers. "Well," she said, and a small, weary smile crossed her face. "That was rather unexpected. I'm sorry you had to witness that. But I think it's important that conversations like these happen honestly, rather than according to a script. After the break, we'll be speaking with a lovely woman from Brighton who's raised over £50,000 for her local hospital." As the familiar theme music played and the cameras cut to commercial, Lorraine finally allowed herself to sink back into her chair. Her producer rushed over, his face a mixture of horror and barely concealed excitement. "That was absolutely incredible television," he whispered. "Are you all right?" Lorraine looked at the door through which Harry had disappeared, then back at her producer. "I'm fine," she said quietly, "but I think I need a cup of tea." In homes across Britain, television stayed tuned to ITV as people processed what they had just witnessed. Social media was already exploding with clips and commentary. By that afternoon, Lorraine would be trending worldwide. The interview had lasted barely 20 minutes. Its reverberations would continue for years.